Welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 119th episode, our returning guest is Jonathan Fowler. You first heard Jonathan Fowler in episodes 2, 10, 20, 21, 29, 30, 31, 32, 34, 35, 43, 48, 51, 56, 64, 74, 83, 92, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 111, 114, 115, 116, and episode 82, which also featured fellow regular guest Ash Burgess of the podcast. Jonathan graduated with a BA in History from Indiana University in 2006. He is an unabashed left-wing political junkie. He has lived and worked in South Korea for over 10 years, trying to help the citizens of that great nation hopefully talk pretty one day. If you listened to the last 7 episodes with Jonathan, you heard us talk about the first 4 seasons of The Wire. On this episode, we'll be discussing up through the very end of the series. So, consider this your blanket spoiler alert. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, what's up, Bob?
Oh, nothing much.
Yeah, no, I got about 15 minutes left, but I know what happened, right? Like, you know, I kind of fucked up. I got busy tonight and stuff with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm good to talk on it.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, but I guess we should mention you had a run-in with a K-pop girl group tonight, apparently, right?
Oh, yeah. I went over, my plans. I had plans and my plans changed a couple times tonight. There's been a lot of reversals tonight, basically. So I was gonna put in my notice for 2 months at my job today, but I came out of my class about 20 minutes before it was over because it was on a break or whatever, and I asked, like, where's the boss? And they said, oh, you're at home already, which is bizarre because he usually doesn't go home until the very end of the night. I was like, damn it, well, I guess I can't, this thing I've been getting myself up to do, kind of, have this talk or whatever, which is not a comfortable conversation, obviously, and stuff, because my quitting after I've been here for 6 years pretty much directly influences his leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how he's going to take it and stuff, so. But he was gone, so, there's nothing I can do, so I have to do it tomorrow after class on Saturday, so.
Mm-hmm.
So that was hard. So then my plan was, there was a very good short story I read a long time ago. And I think it was called What We Wanted to Do. Mm-hmm. And it has like one of the best opening lines of any short story. It's like, what we wanted to do was pour hot grease down on the heads of the barbarians who were coming through our gates. Or something. But this guy is kind of like this mid-level village functionary or something from 500 years ago, is talking about this raid that happened on the thing and like why his plan to defend the city didn't succeed, and it resulted in mass murder and rape inside, and how they'll do better next time defending against the Vikings or something. And so it's just like an epic opening line. Like, what we wanted to do was pour hot grease on the heads of the barbarians as they came to the gate. I'm sure I'm butchering that.
I actually have it pulled up right now. It says, what we wanted to do was spill boiling oil onto the heads of our enemies as they attempted to bang down the gates of our village. But, as everyone knows, we had some problems, primarily technical problems, that prevented us from doing what we wanted to do the way we had hoped to do it.
Yeah, and I think that opening line and also the title, the couple with the title of the short story, which is What We Wanted to Do, is amazing. I think that's amazing. It's just,
I'd never heard of it before. That's funny, though.
So, yeah, it's worth a read. I think it was from the mid-'90s or something when the kind of the corporate speak was, I don't know, topical. So anyways, I was going to put in that notice tonight, but that didn't happen, and it's been pushed to tomorrow. And I pretty much need to give my notice right now because the place where I'm probably going to be working 2 months from now needs me to give 2 months notice to this guy before I quit. And so I pretty much have to do it by the end of this month.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what I wanted to do, again, to come back to the phrase of the book, was to go to Sambon get some Indian curry, take it home, and enjoy the Indian curry while I watched this TV show circa about 9 p.m., 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't happen because I was distracted by 5 or 6 dancing beauties at Samban who were gyrating and stuff, and I couldn't figure out if they were a real K-pop band or kind of like a local knockoff or something that was covering famous songs. And then I went and got the Indian curry, but then I got a message that some of the front desk staff girls wanted to drink with me and eat some chicken. Well, I went and had some drinks with them briefly because that's the kind of invitation you only get about once a year maybe. And they're nice girls, very helpful, very good workers and stuff. So, So I did that, and we talked about things. And then I came home to watch the episode, and I've been watching the episode. And then I had another setback because I thought I can do an hour. I can be ready by midnight. And I was like, oh, the final episode of this show is like an hour and 33 minutes long. And I'm like, oh, man, I just can't catch a break tonight. But I did my damnedest.
But you know what happens. So you've seen it before, so you know what happens. But
yeah, I've been through it twice.
Mm-hmm.
So I may have lost some of the poignancy of the final 20 minutes, but I think I'm good for the rest of the season.
Okay. Well, we could just have 20 minutes of silence while you sit there and watch it. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the long distance bills will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad you finally made it to the end of that gauntlet. So.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a show. You know, I feel like, you know, you came into it. You'd had trouble getting into it at the beginning, as we discussed. I think you went all the way. You went all the way in. You've been all the way through. And from what your message said, you had some reservations about the final season. So I'm very curious to hear about that because, yeah, I think like I think like there are 2 or 3 times in the show that the writers got a little bit. They took creative license, I guess. Mm-hmm. They, made characters do things that we can't hardly imagine real people ever doing in the real world for dramatic purposes to make the larger points. I feel like that the writers were making about the system and about things, but at the same time they had characters acting against their own self-interest and against character in a certain way, almost against character. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Always a little bit irresponsible. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I mentioned, I'm actually while I was waiting for you to finish up there, I was just been finishing that book I told you about, All the Pieces Matter, which I'm interviewing the author, Jonathan Abrams, of that soon. But it's an oral history of The Wire, and it's kind of a behind-the-scenes look of how the show got made and kind of some of the creative decisions and kind of struggles behind the scenes they had. One thing I didn't realize was that the show was nearly canceled after season 3. Because I guess HBO didn't see how you go on after Stringer Bell dies. Like, that was kind of the hook that they had for the show. And then they were like, no, we have 2 more storylines we want to tell. We want to do the media and we want to do education. So they said, okay, fine, you can have these last 2 seasons to finish it up. So I think they kind of knew that going into it. And in retrospect, with all the problems that I had with season 5, and we'll get to those, of course, but I don't actually think the show should have ended after season 4 because they kind of mentioned that there are a lot of loose strands left hanging at the end of season 4, even though we're on to a new subject. Like, we still have the bodies in the vacants. We haven't solved that crime, or no one's been brought to task for that. We still have the kids. We want to see where they go. We still have all these strands that we haven't tied up yet. So I guess there does kind of have to be another season. But one thing that I think did kind of make the show go downhill a little bit is apparently Ed Burns, who was the guy that kind of co-wrote the show with David Simon kind of primarily. He actually left the show in season 5 and he went to work on Generation Kill. And so David Simon was kind of more left to his own devices in that last season. And I think some of his more, literary flair killer instincts, I don't know what you call them, kind of were checked a little bit, because Ed Burns had been a police officer, and he'd also been a middle school teacher, so he kind of brought that realism back down to earth. And I think David Simon really, really wanted to tell that newspaper story, so I think he kind of was like, man, this is my last shot, I'm on my own now, I'm going to do this. And I think that he kind of lost that grounding that Ed Burns gave him, and I guess Ed Burns said he hasn't even really seen the 5th season. He didn't even watch it. So
oh my god,
I know, right?
Really?
Yeah, I think he was gone after that, because in retrospect, it kind of makes sense, because season 4, actually, I think it's kind of competing with season 2 for me for best season right now. And after reading this book, I kind of realized why. It's kind of like you kind of see why these people don't have a chance, and it's like people that say, oh, everyone has the same chance in life, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it just kind of shows the ground level. It's like, even the kids like Dookie that have potential, he's just going to become Bubbles. That's kind of what we see him becoming at the end of season 5. We see Michael's going to be the new Omar. You know what I mean? This is like a dandelion. That's what they call it, a dandelion case. It just keeps growing in the same spot, and it's just a new face on an old thing. So, yeah. But
I thought that was, that's obviously the payoff to the kids, which is a worthwhile. And see, that was the thing. Like when you said you were kind of like that guy in The Simpsons or whatever. The kind of the nerd guy. You're like, worst season ever, worst finale ever. How can you possibly say this is like the best show when it ends like this? And I'm like, I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. I'm just saying, like, I've never actually met anybody else who's gone all the way through all 5 seasons of The Wire and had such a negative reaction to the end.
Okay, well, I guess we'll get right into it. I mean, the thing that I think really hampered this season was the serial killer plotline. It was a nice, neat way for them to tie the newspaper thing to the story, because it gave us the Scott Templeton. And don't think I don't see what you're doing there, David Simon. Templeton the rat from Charlotte's Web. I got you. But
I did not catch that.
Yep, I put that together afterwards.
Is that in the book?
What's that?
Okay.
Yeah, you remember Charlotte's Web, Templeton the rat?
No, all the pieces matter.
No, it wasn't. Actually, I just thought of that on my own. But
holy shit! Wow, yes, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I knew all my children's literature reading would come in handy one day. But yeah, no, it's like
I did too, but I forgot the shit.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah,
I like Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, for sure. But he's a rat, and he's obviously a Stephen Glass, Judith Miller, or not Judith Miller. Yeah, maybe Judith Miller. What all these unscrupulous journalists that we see throughout the history of journalism. He's just right in that mold. I loved Gus. Obviously, you're supposed to love Gus. He's kind of the hero of the newsroom. He figures out what's going on. No one listens to him. He's basically everything I aspire to be as a journalist. He's he doesn't let anything by. He's very grounded, and he wants to do good work and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I was also just crushed that he won the Pulitzer. I'm like, come on, there's no comeuppance for this guy. He's going to get away with it, really? I guess if they had a season 6, I guess they planned on him doing some actual journalism after he won the Pulitzer to bring it back around, so he realizes that he was wrong in retrospect for what he did, which I guess would have been a good payoff. But it was just so disappointing, because I'm like, you're going to take me all the way here, and he's still going to. There's no constant. He doesn't get nothing. He gets his Pulitzer, really? But I understand why, because McNulty's thing didn't fall apart because they still wanted the drugs on the table for Marlowe, even the case was tainted. They couldn't say that was a fraud because there was too much dirt in that case. If they admitted that, they're basically blackmailing Levy to get anything at all out of it at this point. So I guess I see why they had to wrap it up like that. But this all relates back to the problem of the serial killer plotline. It was a huge mistake. And I get what they were trying to do. They're showing that you have to manipulate the higher ups to get them to pay for the actual police work. But this is okay, I get that McNulty's falling off. He's drinking again. He's cheating on Beatty with women on the front of his car. I get that. I get he's kind of falling off the edge. But this seems wild even for McNulty, and the fact that beyond that Lester Freeman not only goes along with it but helps lead the charge, and then he gets away with it at the end, and nothing everything happens and they blame it all on this one guy. Like none of that rang true to me. Like that still like bugs me. But I think that everything else I kind of was like, okay. After I had thought about it a little bit, I'm like, okay, the rest of it kind of had to happen the way it happened. I was mad that Omar died, but I guess from reading this book, I guess he was supposed to have been killed off in the first season, and he was just so popular they kept him around. I was mad that Prop Joe died, but I guess it made sense because Marlo had finally cornered him, and he'd been playing Marlo all this time, so I guess that makes sense. But those are my two of my favorite characters from the kind of the later seasons, especially. That I was like, man, why do they have to go? And so I've mellowed a little bit since I first saw it, but I was just like, my jaw was on the floor when I first saw the ending. I'm like, that is how you end it? What?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you or I really had a problem with the way that The Sopranos ended, but a lot of people felt very betrayed by the ending of The Sopranos, and so, maybe this is kind of your taste of that, actually, in a different way, but, for different reasons.
Right. Well, I like the ending of The Sopranos a lot, actually. I really do. Like, more I think about it, I think that really ended on a good note. Like, it doesn't spoon-feed you anything. It kind of makes you figure out what happened, without knowing. It's not quite as spelled out. I feel like the points they were making at the end of this season had already been made better in previous seasons. Like, the people that fight against the system aren't going to win, and, the bad guys get away with it. But that's another thing. I'm jumping all over the map here, but this is, the final season, so we're trying to wrap it all up together. But, I'm not against people getting away with things that they shouldn't if it feels genuine. Like Clay Davis, for example. I love the scene with him in the courtroom making the emotional appeal after they lay out all the checks and everything, and they do the forensic accounting and show how he's been stealing from people, and he basically dashes that all to the wind with one emotional plea to I'd do it all again. Like, that felt real to me, of course. Like, yes, it's like he's got this silver tongue and he's gonna get out of this, so. But
Clay Davis is, he is you hate the character, but you love the character.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I was just trying to help the people. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You put me out there on the street, I'm going to go back out there and I'm going to do it all again. And they're like, you're so right.
I don't know, Senator. I want to believe you. I'm your lawyer. But there's all this up on the board that Mr. Bond has on display. $11,000 to West Side Hoops. Next day, $11,000 drawn. Then, $11,000 deposited in your personal banking account.
You bet it all went into my account. It made it easier for me to do my job. And at the end of the day, not one penny stayed with me.
I need you to do better than that, Senator. Where are your records?
Records?
Yes, records. For example, this check for $11,000, dated January 22nd.
That was last winter, right? So, some went to pay everyone's BGE, because half my district was going to have the heat turned off. And then some went for puff jackets for them that got children in need. Let me tell you something, man. My neck of the woods, it's a jungle out there. Everybody living hand to mouth, improvising, hustling, make do with as little as you can imagine. Hell, that TV show, what the Survivor? Man, they want some good contestants. They need to come around West Side. Folks I know, we do great on that show. Practice every damn day of our lives. Hell, and Fear Factor? Oh, shit. Don't even get me started.
Forgive me, but I still don't understand how that justifies...
Let me tell you something, brother. I don't know how they do it out in Roland Park. Maybe Prosecutor O'Bonna can enlighten me on that. But my world is strictly cash and carry, and I am Clay Davis. My people need something, they know where to find me. Let me tell you, brother, I step out the door, hit the corner of Mosier and Pennsylvania, you better believe my pockets are bulging. But by the time I get to Robert Street...
Objection! Objection, Your Honor!
Senator, take a seat and refrain from offhand references to Mr. Bond.
My apologies, Your Honor.
But these charities were set up for basketball leagues in city rec centers, weren't they?
Yeah, but you give me $20,000 for a basketball and an air pump, I am pulling goodly on that for whoever comes at me. Senator Clay, I got to bury my mother, bail out my son, buy a new shirt for a job interview, pay my child's asthma doctor. Takes me half an hour to go 100 yards. And excuse me if I didn't ask that old arthritis woman for a receipt. Or that young mother needed the Similac to sign a damn piece of paper so I don't have to be up here in this box right now explaining to folks who never been in our neck of the woods how things truly are. And if a jury of my peers, you all, deem it right and true for me to walk out of here and upright and justified, man, oh, I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm gonna do the same damn thing tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that until they got me laid out at Marge's funeral home and trucked me off to Mount Auburn.
Silence in this court.
I just want to say that despite all the false accusations made against me, the people who I continue to serve have spoken.
What the fuck just happened?
As long as I can to serve the people.
Whatever it was, they don't teach it in law school.
That was amazing. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, obviously, as always with the show. Clay Davis is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Clay Davis, man, and he was so pissed at everybody. He thought they were turning their backs on him and stuff, and he was going around making the rounds to talk to people, and he felt so affronted and betrayed himself, and then he just, he beat the charge basically, and they couldn't get him because of double jeopardy basically, and so then Lester Freeman went back on him and said, "Look, what can you get me on other things and stuff here? Because I'm gonna take this to the FBI, and they're gonna recharge you if you don't give me something on some other things." And he's like, "Okay, here's what I can give you." So, yeah, Clay Davis. Oh my God, we're gonna come back to the end, but. Yeah. Okay, this season, boy, let me check my notes. I know we're going to be careful when we get into the notes because I don't want to go just item by item as much as possible. But at the same time, there's definitely things that I won't remember that we need to mention. So, yeah, I think at the beginning of the season, in the first episode, they kind of set it up talking about kind of some cheeky lines about how Americans would believe anything. You believe everything you read and stuff. And there were things about budget cuts, hitting overtime, and paying the police department. Police cars were not being serviced and everything, and so people were not being able to have the materials or the overtime or anything to do their jobs. I was a little curious about how in the hell Chris and Snoop were still in the street doing what they did through the last season, but I guess that was explained a little bit later about the gun charge. It was something happened with that. Marlowe was always aware that he was getting tailed, so you feel like at the beginning the police are doing good work, but he's like, "Oh yeah, I know they're on me. Yeah, we got that guy in the car, we got the guy in the van and stuff," and they're like, "Oh, so they totally know exactly what's going on." Michael had Dookie working his quarter. Michael had Duquan working his corner there that he had gotten, and he's basically a hitman for Marlowe and Chris and Snoop. Yeah, and Dookie was not getting any respect from Spider or the other guys in the corner, which, was causing some problems because, I mean, I really feel like Michael's kind of an asshole in this season. He realizes the problem that his guys are not respecting Duquan, who's his good friend and stuff, but he doesn't lay down the law on these guys and say, "No, if you respect me, you're gonna respect Duquan." He never put himself on the line there for his friend, and Duquan got bounced around, and basically Duquan becomes the next Bubbles, basically, and the scene where he goes back to teacher Presbolewski, Mr. Presbo, and he's saying, "Look, I need some money to get into a GED program," and he's like, "You don't need money to get into the GED program, and you don't qualify anyways because you're still high school age or something." He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna sign up, Mr. Presbo. You'll see," and stuff. And that was just heartbreaking, I thought, because he's not going to. He's getting into the heroin and stuff. I don't know. That was brutal.
Yeah, definitely.
And yet we had this situation with Bubbles, coming to terms with the death of his friend last season, being interviewed by the Sun, Baltimore Sun, and getting profiled and having that being a piece of good journalism where the journalist takes his time with the story, does the story the right way, respects his sources, listens to them, etc. I mean, and finally you get the scene where Bubbles is basically staying at his sister's house, and he can't come up the stairs. She keeps the top door locked, so he has to stay downstairs at all times, and he has to go out when she goes out and stuff. And finally, at the end, she tells him to come on up into the upstairs. So she's welcoming him back into the family, polite society, humanity. I don't know. It was an amazing scene, I thought.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. Although you're not supposed to show your sources your story before it's published for approval. That's a big no-no. And I think Gus even mentions that.
Yeah. Well, it's, I don't know. He, it's the alternative is Templeton, and I don't know.
No, there's not the only alternative.
Yeah. Well, obviously he was doing good journalism.
He was doing better than Templeton for sure. You can't give quote approval to. I mean, you can say if you don't want me to rewrite the story at all, that's fine. But I would never show somebody a story before it's published for approval. That's not a hard and fast rule. That's more of a personal rule of mine that you could follow or not, I guess. But I think it's just. I think your ultimate responsibility is to the reader personally, but.
Yeah. Okay. Well, by the way, you were pissed off about the death of Prop Joe and Omar, which, everybody was. What did you think at the end when Cheese got shot in the head?
That was right. That was right.
I was with Marlo. I was with Marlo. And, now this is what it is or something. And then Slim Charles comes up and just shoots him in the side of the head.
Yep.
And everybody's like, man, you just cost us $900,000. That was for Prop Joe. And they're like, okay. I think I've heard that audiences cheered when that scene was on broadcast on TV because they were so sick of Cheese's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, after he betrayed Prop Joe, that was I was ready for something to happen to him, and I think Slim Charles was just the guy to do it.
Yeah, that was a moment. That was something.
Yeah, and
yeah, and no, well, I mean, in the meantime, we know that things did not go well for Cheese's son, Randy Wagstaff, who is in the group home, not talking to. It's a year later. Bong tried to go back and get some quotes from him about the Marlon thing and stuff the year before. At this point, he's a hardened, basically a thug. He's beating up the younger kids in this group home. He's making a big show of not talking to the police because he doesn't want to be the snitch that he used to be. I mean, he is totally transformed, and we get the sense of again, based on the parallelism with the older gangsters and stuff, people in the community, we get the sense of where his life could be going, and I don't know. It's Prop Joe's dead, Cheese is dead, and Randy is on a bad path. It's a messed up situation.
Yeah, I was upset about Prop Joe getting caught, but I mean, he did play Marlo through that whole season, like we mentioned before. He's kind of playing the chess game, and he finally got caught up in a checkmate situation. So, I mean, he was playing the game, and it finally caught up to him. What did you think of the way Omar went out?
Well, yeah, it was messed up. Well, I mean, but what do you mean? Let's talk about that for a second. What do you mean by Joe was playing Marlo? Because I feel like Joe was honestly just trying to bring Marlo into the co-op as a normal member, and show him the benefits of it and the costs of not being in it. I don't think he was actually trying to hurt the guy in any way. He was just,
Well, I think I guess I don't mean I play him is probably the wrong word to say, but I think he should have known that Marlo was not he was not domesticated, and he was not going to be domesticated, and that kind of plays out at the end of the.
A lot of people Levy should have known that.
Yes,
and I think that was an amazing scene because Levy tells him, "Look, you're going to get out because the case against you is falling apart." But Chris Partlow is going down for life. These other two guys, Monk and I forget the other guy's name, they're going to jail for 20 years for dealing, but you're free. But the police are going to be watching you now, and if they even smell a whiff of you getting back near the drug game, they're going to come back on with a new case. And so you got to get out. And he's like, okay. And at first he seems to be okay with that, and he sells his connects to the Greeks for $10 million to the other, gangsters who pool together. And then, he finds himself later, this is the point where I didn't see this part tonight, but I'm remembering it. He finds himself at one of those meetings where it's kind of like, he's kind of like a Stringer Bell. He's a fish out of water, basically, and he's realizing what it's going to be like to be this businessman or something and how this is just not him. And then he goes back out on the corner and he, some guys pull a gun on him and they shoot through his sleeve or something, and he punches them and takes the gun or something, and they run off, and he's back on his corner and he's back on the street, and this is just who he is, and this is where he's going to be.
Yeah. And they point out in the book here, too, that I just read, that this is like, he got exactly where Stringer Bell wanted to be, and he realized that he wanted no part of it. Like, he got to the level that Stringer Bell was trying to get, like Stringer Bell was fighting tooth and nail to get that into one of those, glitzy things where Levy was taking him, and now it's like Marlowe's just ready to throw it all away. I was also kind of sick of Marlowe by the end of that. I was just like, okay, fine, whatever. Sociopath gets out, does more bad things. I can't wait to see season 6 where he keeps running wild. Whoopee.
Marlowe. What a him and Chris and Steve are just a demonic triumvirate, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that was something. Well, anyways, back to the first episode, there was some more parallelism, I felt like, between the budget cuts, downsizing in the police department as well, no more overtime and the cars not getting serviced. And then there was also, cutbacks, buyouts, downsizing at the Baltimore Sun. And, the word, we're just going to have to do more with less, right? And, obviously, people know you can't do more with less. And I think that's something that my current hogwa in my school is figuring out, that, you can't do more with less. Like, the good people are going to leave, and, students are going to suffer, and profits are going to dwindle, and it's just a downward spiral, right? It's I don't know. We had Mayor Carcetti now, and Nerisse, the woman chomping at the bit to take over. She's like, you jumped the line. It was my turn to be mayor. He's like, well, maybe if I become governor of Maryland, then you can become the mayor of Baltimore after I leave. And so he kind of bought her cooperation at that point, but they had some meetings and stuff. And that was interesting, I thought. Hold on, I'm on the same page. They both decided to protect Clay Davis from federal prosecution, and they wanted to give it to their local prosecutor, Bond, right? And Bond ended up not being able to succeed in the case that basically Lester Freeman brought him, even though it was basically an open and shut case, because Clay Davis played, he basically played the race card, and he played it from the bottom of the deck, to paraphrase the O.J. trial, which I thought this whole Clay Davis thing kind of became an allegory for at that point. The prosecutors and the district attorney and stuff, they're just like, they're dumbfounded by the performance he's putting on, and they think they can just get it based on the undeniable facts and evidence that they have, but they're not factoring in the racial politics of the town and the emotional appeal that Clay Davis makes basically to the jury directly. And so that was just a fascinating thing. And and the thing was, in a way, it was kind of a partisan decision. Basically, Carcetti and Maurice are both Democrats, and they did not want to throw Clay Davis, a fellow Democrat, to the Republicans at the state level or the national level, basically, and that kind of cost the case.
Yeah. Also, side note, I think we may have discussed this before, but one of the main inspirations for Carcetti was Martin O'Malley.
Martin O'Malley. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally got robbed by Hillary. Not even fair. Blue wave. I don't know. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. That was another thing that I was aware of during the election, was that O'Malley was Carcetti, basically, and so that, and they never, frankly, it's a what can we say? It's kind of a credit to the fact that guy never had a shot, that we never actually had a very good profile of him as the mayor of Baltimore or whatever he was, because I would have been fascinated to have read, a long-form piece on his tenure there to just see how it stacked up against Carcetti, basically, the great white hope of Baltimore and The Wire, and how that would have worked out. But we never even, he was never even a contender to the point that we actually got a full accounting, really, that I read.
Yeah.
Like what kind of a guy he was in Maryland at the time. So.
Right. Well, I don't think he thought it was a very flattering portrayal. It's funny, you remember when he goes to see Carcetti goes to see the governor, and the governor won't meet with him, and that guy keeps coming down and telling them, just a few more minutes. That was actually the real governor at the time. That guy that comes down to tell them a few more minutes. Yeah. And
that was the real governor.
That was the real governor of Maryland at the time. Yeah. And apparently David Simon offered O'Malley a cameo, and he declined. So because he was none too happy with his portrayal as Carcetti.
Yeah, that's bizarre because. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's plenty of Baltimore pride from this show. I think Baltimore appreciates that it was filmed in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Gave, a huge profile of the city, but at the same time, individuals within the milieu there were not too flattered, I guess, with their portrayals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although apparently there was a former mayor that actually played the health department commissioner after Amsterdam, when they're having those meetings about Amsterdam when it all goes down. And that was the previous mayor who actually did try something like Amsterdam, and obviously it suffered the same fate. But maybe he was a little more forgiving because they kind of portrayed that in a little more of a favorable light. But
wow. Okay, well, if Amsterdam was ever attempted, then that kind of discredits probably something I said in the past, which was that I felt like that Amsterdam was one of those kind of pie-in-the-sky things that never would have actually been tried.
I don't think it happened exactly the way that they said it happened in the show. I think it was just probably attempted on a smaller scale, and it was probably a little less secretive. But I think it kind of did turn out once the governor's office or whatever got wind of it, and higher ups, and they kind of shut it down. But I don't think it was like this one rogue police commander doing this under the nose of everybody. It was more like the mayor taking charge and doing it, and then having to shut it down later. So, but
yeah, I like the line in the story where they said 120 people were evacuated or something, and they're like, wait, and like the senior copy editors or whatever at the newspaper were like, you mean 120 people were given enemas? And they're like, no, what do you mean? They're like, well, people can't be evacuated or something. It was like, wow, okay, that's I'm an English teacher, but these guys are pulling up little details of the English language that even I'm not familiar with, just an intimate level. So that was kind of fun to see those guys kind of running the newsroom and just knocking down all the younger people. Are like, what do you mean there's an error or something? So that was funny.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We had Augustus Haynes, I think was his name. We had Alma Gutierrez. We had Scott Templeton. We had the people in the newsroom. that was always an interesting dynamic throughout the series. And actually, we find out that the black guy who runs Carcetti's campaign in season 4, basically, he used to be a newspaper reporter, but now he's gone into the political kind of activist game instead, or political operative game, I guess we should say.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So he still had connections with some of the people like Gus at the newspaper there. That was, again, there's just so much interconnectivity in this show.
Well, that also mirrors real life, too, because David Axelrod, who was kind of the same thing to Barack Obama that this guy was to Carcetti, was I forget if it was a Chicago Sun-Times or Chicago Tribune reporter before he went to work for that. So I think that is a common theme that, a former journalist will jump on a, politician's train if they think they're going, big places.
Yeah. I liked it when they had the interview or whatever with they were investigating basically drug dealers getting bought out of properties that they had for extremely high prices. And I think it was Gus in the newsroom read the quote from Fat Face Rick. He said, "Hey, I'm a businessman. City wants to help me out. I ain't going to argue." It's like they're giving him like $1 million for like a house that he bought for a couple $100,000 or $50,000 or something. Yeah. and like he's got this very benevolent view, very naive and benevolent view of the city government that they're just going to give a guy, millions of dollars for this property without some quid pro quo or something in there, which is, anybody else could see. But he's just like, hey, if the city government wants to help me out, I'm not going to complain. It's like, yeah, the city government is doing some dirt there. So that was a fun line. What did you think about Herc working for Levy, the defense attorney, the dirty defense attorney?
I guess it makes sense for him, and he was able to help a little bit by giving Marlowe's number to Carver. So, he was still doing a little bit of good, even though he was doing a little bit of bad. And I guess Levy never found out about it, and it only helped what happened with Marlowe at the end there. So.
Well, at the end, he also told them that he suspected that there was a wiretap because that's what these people do. And that's how Levy knew to kill the case. So, Herc, like the Lord, he giveth and he taketh away.
But he didn't know that, he gave the number to them, though, right?
Herc never knew anything.
No, not Herc, Levy. Levy never knew that Herc gave Carver the number.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting at the end when, he's, basically, these people are, at least Marlo Stanfield is getting off of this huge bust and stuff, and Levy talks to him and stuff, and he says, hey, you're a genius. And he's like, hey, I'm just doing what I do. And he's like, hey, why don't you come over to my house tonight? We're having some food and stuff. And he's like, really? Me? He's like, yeah, why not? I was like, okay. I was thinking, there was all that talk in season 3 about Herc not having a rabbi. And I was thinking, okay, now Herc has got a new rabbi. But yeah, Herc has always kind of been trying to attach himself to better people than him or more capable people than him. And now it seems like Levy is going to be his person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so. But yeah, he gave them the number for the wiretap, but then he let it be known about the wiretap and kind of killed that case. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyways, let's see. I think episode 2 here. We had the beginning of the speech by Bubbles. It was an amazing speech. I thought he was at he's doing the Narcotics Anonymous group and stuff, and he gave that speech. And he said, I used to get so high, I used to live to get high. And then he stops talking, he stops taking it seriously, he starts kind of joking, kind of as a means of evasion. And, Waylon in the back looks kind of disappointed at him because he realizes he's not directly addressing what happened with Sherrod. And then he says, yeah, I used to love to get high. Got to the point, and then he kind of pauses and he says, I'm not in the right place to talk about this right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, just a powerful scene, obviously.
Yeah, I like that scene
by
too.
the end of the season, kind of come full circle on that. But that was a good speech.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had, I think in episode 2, we had the part where Marlowe starts to corrupt Cheese, basically. And he, there was a meeting where I think in the first episode, Marlowe appeared. He knew the cops were trailing him, so he made it look like he was going to the hotel with a woman to have sex. But he sent her up to a hotel room by herself, and then he just went to the co-op meeting. And the police didn't know that the co-op meeting was basically going on right under their noses. And some people had, called out Cheese or something in the meeting, and kind of Marlowe and Cheese kind of made eyes at each other, like, we don't like these guys, we don't respect these guys. And then Marlowe sent the killers, Chris and Snoop, to go after some people, and he said, next we stepped to Junebug for talking that shit. He was a dead man when he opened his mouth. He just walking around not knowing it. I was like, whoa, that's cool. You're just killing like some other people in Pop Joe's thing for no reason. And then he brought Cheese in on the kill, and probably there was some torture involved there and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that kind of got Cheese's loyalty, because his uncle had stepped over him for a promotion to some other people to take over some property. Mm-hmm. And, Cheese took it personally, and he kind of like, family wasn't so important at that point, and he just wanted revenge on these other people who he felt were kind of overstepping him in the hierarchy there. Mm-hmm. I thought it was, wild when, Marlowe went to the prison and he was meeting Sergei, or Boris, as he's sometimes known. Why is it always Boris? Right? And so he goes to meet Sergei, and he's been putting like lots of money on Sergei's his prison tab, basically. His what do you call that in prison? The
on your books, or commissary.
There's a word for it. I forget what it's. Commissary, yeah, and stuff, and so he goes there to meet Sergei, and he sees a person come sit down across from him, and it's Avon Bechstein. And Avon basically says, "Look, you need to give a lot of money to some people that I want you to give money to, and then, I will let you talk to this guy." And so Marlowe does that and stuff, and then he meets with Sergei, and Sergei puts him in touch with the Greeks and stuff. And you've just got to think, like, the Greeks must have been so pissed at, they basically gave the go-ahead for Marlowe to kill Prop Joe. Mm-hmm. And they admitted that Prop Joe had been steady, quiet, reliable, all this stuff. And then within, like, the first big shipment that's supposed to come to Marlowe, everything gets fucked up. They all get caught on the wiretap. Marlowe and his whole crew go to jail. I just wanted a scene where we could see how the Greeks took that, because they must have realized, like, oh my God, we really screwed up by going to this clown.
Exactly.
But yeah. So what did you think about Scott Templeton as a journalist?
He's an archetype for sure. He's somebody that, he wants to get ahead. Although, from an outsider's perspective, never having worked at a paper like as big or as prestigious as the Baltimore Sun, I would be fine if my career, like, if that was like the highest I ever got in journalism, being a reporter for the Baltimore Sun or a paper like that. That's not bad. Like, that's a pretty good journalism career. Sure, you could go to the New York Times. Sure, you can go to the Washington Post. Wherever, but, the Baltimore Sun is nothing to sneeze at, and, it is like a top elite level paper, and, if you do good work there, it's going to get recognized. And even with all these cuts, it didn't seem like he was in danger. He was up a younger crew that didn't have the tenure, that wasn't really under the gun for a buyout or anything. So if he just stayed there and done a little more, hard work and investigative reporting, he could have probably even got where he wanted to go the right way. It's just like, geez, you even need a shortcut now? Like, you've already made it in a lot of ways. Like, I know a lot of journalists that I've worked with that would kill for the opportunity just to be where he doesn't even want to be. So for that, that was annoying, first of all. But I do see that as an archetype. But like I pointed out to you, and we talked about this a little bit, it's like, these people always have to, like, make up some heart-wrenching detail to, like, get their stories out, and they're always using people who don't want to be identified, and they don't want to give up their sources, and they don't use their names, and the quotes are a little too perfect. And Gus is like, when that one quote comes through from the homeless rally or whatever, when they're having the serial killer or whatever, and he's like, yeah, this is the best quote I could ever ask for. That's why I'm worried. And also, all these people were in public at a, rally, and you're telling me you couldn't find one person who would want their name used? I get it. I've used, people that wanted their names changed, few and far between. And it's like, if they're in a very sensitive situation, if they have a job and speaking out might, endanger their job, that's something where I will, I'll say, okay, look, I won't use your real name, or I'll use a pseudonym, or I'll just use your first name or something. If there's a public thing where it's like you're at a baseball game or a rally, you can't find one person that would give you your full name. Come on. And the quote's just perfect, and this kid has a heart-wrenching story. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was, one of the baseball game, what he said, let's see, he said, look, I've got a kid in a wheelchair outside the stadium wanting to go to the game, but unable because he didn't have the money for a scalp ticket and stuff. And he gave him, he didn't give his name, because he was worried because he was cutting class to go to the baseball game. And then, later, Gus says, well, look, a black kid from the inner city of Baltimore going to a baseball game, he's like, NFL or, basketball maybe, but not baseball or something. And he's like, he could smell that the story was, too cliched, but also, missing some local detail perhaps that, Templeton didn't really think of. And stuff. So, and he, it was kind of funny when he was talking to all the people at the baseball game.
Yeah.
At the game, he's like, oh, no, I just came, I don't know, we come here, and, my kids like it or whatever, or I don't know, there were people there who were at the game that just were not giving him the enthusiastic, all-American, I love baseball, it's the love of the game kind of thing. I'm just here. And so he knew he needed that, he needed to have a real baseball-loving kid in a wheelchair who couldn't get in.
Yeah.
And I think at some point somebody said it was too good of a story to check out. They didn't want to investigate it because it's just so perfect.
Right. Well, some people, and I'm reading from that book, and also, I kind of got the sense from the show that he kind of, David Simon had an axe to grind with, certain higher-ups at the Baltimore Sun, and apparently one of the people's names was actually one of the names. They just used it for a different character, the people they were based on, those two executives at the top that just completely don't want to know they don't want to know if it's right or wrong, they just want to win the awards or whatever. So, people criticized him for having a little bit of an axe to grind, but, that felt, real to me, because those people aren't, Gus is down there, he's in the trenches, he's seeing, what's real, what's not, he's not letting things slide that shouldn't slide. These people, if they can win an award off of something and squint their eyes hard enough to make them believe it's real, they're willing to do that, you know what I mean? So they're a little bit disconnected from the day-to-day, so that rang pretty true as far as, an archetype of, kind of management, as opposed to somebody and I guess I'm a little sympathetic to Gus, because my previous job title at the Kokomo Tribune was city editor, and he's also city editor. So maybe I feel a little bit of kinship with him, but he kind of sees what's going on because his nose is to the grindstone every day. He's out there in the middle of it, and these people are just kind of in their glass offices in the back, just kind of observing it all and thinking what they could win. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really interesting. I felt the dialogue. For me, the dialogue, I will say, in the newsroom felt a little bit almost too snappy sometimes. It felt kind of like what I imagine the West Wing or something would be like, sort of just kind of everybody well spoken and erudite and everything, and I don't know. It could be wrong. I don't know. Is the newsroom really like that? Is everybody just
that's probably the most idealized way you could have it, but sure. Yes, the newsroom is a very chatty place. It's usually very loud. There's always people doing that what you talk about with that people arguing over a word. That happens a fair amount. People grabbing the style book, the AP style book, and arguing over the usage of this or that. That happens a fair amount. And just kind of the hum and the chatter. It's never that eloquent mostly, but that's a very and it kind of reminded me of those old school black and white His Girl Friday type movies where it's like the Schmitty, and it's like back and forth and the repartee. That's the most idealized version of that. But sure, yeah, I mean, our normal newsroom is kind of loud and chatty, and those little arguments do happen all the time. So
yeah. Well, I heard a lot of people quoting the style book. I never saw anybody pull it on, actually, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, that one guy, I assume, had memorized it, so...
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it when somebody asked about Clay Davis. They say, "You think he knows the indictment's coming?" And I think Friedman says, "Clay Davis has been waiting for the other shoe to drop for his whole life. He knows." And I was like, "Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, he knows Clay Davis' style."
Yeah.
And then at the end, I think it was the end of that chapter that McNulty, starts drinking his whiskey and he stages the first homeless murder because he wants to, free up the funds here. Playing the long game to free up the funds to continue the Marlo Stanfield wire. Okay, episode 3, Not for Attribution.
She's getting out of bed to go see her story possibly on the front page, which is an interesting thing for me to see because when I write, or when I was at the Kokomo Tribune and I was writing my columns, those would always appear inside the paper, and I was perfectly fine with that. As long as it was printed somewhere, I didn't really care what page it was on. But I think it's more of a thing with bigger papers, and if there's more staff and a bigger competition to see who's going to get out front, it's like my first front page story, like that. I think that's like a big thing, and you get to tell people and show people and put it on your resume and stuff. I think that's more of a thing with like larger newspapers. It's like my story was on the front, and I just never I've only worked for mostly small to mid-sized publications that I would put it on the front if you want, but as long as it's printed somewhere on a piece of paper, I really don't care. So.
Yeah, so, did you ever get on the front page?
Did I what?
Did you ever get on the front page?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and when I was at the Ukiah Daily Journal, I had my column was on the front page of the Sunday paper every Sunday, and that was the most read paper of the week. So, yeah, but that was 10,000, circulation, and, Baltimore Sun, I don't know what they are, but it's got to be in the, on a Sunday, it's probably got to be in the hundreds of thousands. It's a different beast. But, yeah, no, I've been on the front page plenty of times, but it never really, it was never oh, I need to be on the front or it doesn't count, who knows?
I was going to say that it sounded like you hadn't been on the front page. Maybe you're just jealous, kind of was it Common or Cameron? Who was it? Was doing Bill O'Reilly? You mad? Oh
yeah, Cameron. Yeah. No, the Baltimore Sun is 250. Yeah.
I don't care. I don't want to be on the front page anyway. It's okay. Gosh, why are these people so ambitious?
Well, I know mostly what I did, at least at the Kokomo Tribune, was opinion stuff, editorials, columns, and stuff, and that usually never runs on the front page. Usually just news and features and that on the front. And I've had that plenty of times, and I've even had, like I said, columns around on the front, but. When it was 10,000, 20,000 as opposed to the Baltimore Sun. I'm looking right now on Wikipedia's 250,000 circulation for Sunday editions. So that's a little bit of a bigger deal, and especially when there's a larger staff too. There's probably a competition around who's going to get on the front and who's going to be shoved inside. So
yeah. Yeah, it's a journalism thing. I'm sure we'll come back to it here, but it's a fascinating thing throughout this season. Yeah, I thought it was, again, I was excited to get to season 4 and season 5 because your professional background is in education.
Yeah, journalism,
media,
right?
So I thought that would be, these would be 2 seasons that might tickle your fancy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I'm not sorry that they went down that road with the newspaper thing. Like I said, I thought Gus was one of my favorite characters of the whole series, and I just thought he really embodied what I want to be as a journalist, and he was really kind of the quiet hero of that situation. But it's I was just so disappointed that Templeton got away with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is Baltimore, gentlemen. God will not save you, right? I think Burrell said a couple seasons back. I mean, I think that's kind of the message of the show, is that these institutions are, kind of incompetent, corrupt, damaging, and yet individuals can make a change, affect a change in their community, but they can't do it through their institutions and stuff. So, I think that's kind of like the shining light that shines through the whole show, basically. I enjoyed the lunch of Jay Landsman in episode 3, which was Chinese takeout, Diet Pepsi, and Pepto-Bismol. And at one point during the season, I think he was looking at like a Victoria's Secret or something. He's like, "What's that?" Because he's always got a porno magazine. And he's like, "Oh, I'm kind of doing a change. I'm kind of looking at them differently. They're kind of hot with their clothes on." Oh my god. Jay Landsman, oh boy.
Character growth.
What a character. Somebody said, I think when during the trial of Clay Davis, they had the guy who likes to rob houses or whatever, and the guy who was caught carrying the money, our state senator, basically out of the projects and stuff. And he said, "On advice of my attorney, I ain't going to answer that. Y'all trying to criminate me here."
Yeah.
I thought that was great, to criminate me. That was fun. Cheese. Oh God, I forgot about this betrayal. But Cheese gave up Butchie to Marlowe to basically torture and kill, to try to bring Omar out of hiding, and they did that with a vengeance. Prop Joe said about Marlowe at one point, "Ain't easy civilizing this motherfucker." Which, I think was what Prop Joe thought that was his mission this season, was to try to make a reasonable person out of Marlowe, and it just was not happening, obviously. So.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that we both saw Marlowe in the islands, and we both saw also Omar kind of living large down in Mexico or wherever he was, and it's like, man, if you these are two guys that are from Baltimore that got maybe not enough money for the rest of their lives, but certainly enough for a while, and they still, there's a drawback for them somehow. I mean, obviously Omar with Butchie, and Marlowe with just being Marlowe, I guess, in Baltimore or whatever. But it's like, man, you've been to Baltimore, you've seen the vacants, the poverty, the desolation, but you have like $400,000 in the islands just sitting there waiting for you, and you're really going to take the fight back? I don't know, dude. Just stay down there. It sounds like you're set. Like,
yeah. Well, it's I think it's human nature. We all like what we're used to.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, leaving this job, leaving the job right now, which I'm thinking about doing, is like, it's hard. I've been at this place for 6 years, working hard. Building relationships. Making that jump to another place. I mean, I could probably make a go of it there almost just as well, and it may even be better in the long run. But at the same time, it's a lot of instability, and there's no guarantee things will be set up as quickly as I'd like. It's less stable. I could probably stay here indefinitely until the place goes bankrupt, or they decide to throw me out of this country or something. At the new place, I've got no loyalties from the people there and stuff, and I don't, so I can kind of understand it. Like, I mean, if Marlowe leaves Baltimore with the money he's got now, he can't come back 10 years later if he runs out of money and try to take over Baltimore again, because he is who he is now, And so I can see that and stuff. And I think at the same time, like, he's very much like Avon Barksdale in that he is, as Avon said, just a gangster, I suppose, right? At the core, that's what he is. That's what he wants to be. And even when Levy gives him the ultimatum and says, "Look, you've got to get out of this thing and take your money and leave," or they will arrest you 6 months down the line after the election or something, when they can afford to screw up one of the cases and still put you in jail. And he's like, "Well, I'm still going to go back out on that corner." So I think that's just something that he's kind of key. Yeah, Trouble in Paradise, Double Trouble in Paradise. Marlowe and Omar, both, south of the border, west of the sun, what have you. Yeah, that was fascinating. I think we come next to episode 5, Transitions. Daniels and Burrell.
Episode 4, you mean?
That he wants to fire. Yeah, I wrote 5. Is it 4?
It's 4.
Let me actually look at that. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. That is Transitions. Okay, sorry, I wrote down the wrong number there. Yeah, Daniels and Burrell. Carcetti makes it clear that he wants to fire Burrell and promote Daniels. And Templeton gets some perfect quotes from Maurice about how, he had sharpened the knife, but Daniels just stuck it in or something. And Daniels was like, I didn't say that bullshit. He's like, and Burrell won't even acknowledge him. He's like, I'm not even talking to you, but it's like, you're trying to take my job. And he's like, I don't even want the job. And he's like, okay. There was the great scene where Clay Davis is walking up the court steps to his trial, and he's scared as hell. You can see it on his face. But they've called all the news media there to come and cover this to make it humiliating for him. And he just puts on a smile when he sees the newspaper. He's like, Jane, I insisted that I be called. He says, Senator, it's our understanding that you're the target of an investigation into theft and fraud. No, pardon, no. Some people are confused about some things, but that's why I came here, to set them straight. That's why I came down here today, set them straight. Happy to do it, too. Happy to avail myself of the opportunity to clear things up down here. Ain't no big thing, just seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding about some of the dealings here in the community. And then he walks off smiling, like he's just still just this happy-go-lucky guy, just happy to be there and fix things for people. And then he once he gets out of sight of the newspaper, his horrified look returns to his face and stuff. So
I did notice that. Yeah.
Clay Davis was just oh my God, he was a force of nature in the Baltimore area, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I love one of my favorite scenes, and I think I posted this on Facebook years ago when I watched this for the second time, was when Carcetti was firing Burrell, basically. He said, I wanted to say a few words about public service and about Irvin H. Burrell. During my time on the city council, Irv was no stranger to me. I chaired the public safety subcommittee, and I called upon him many times. We worked closely, and when I became mayor, we formed a strong relationship. And then in the newsroom of the newspaper, Gus says, he feared and hated me, and I merely wanted him dead. I thought that was a great summation. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, about the newspaper sometimes, is that, by and large, people working in the news media are not idiots, right? But they have to report things as they're said, and sometimes that doesn't capture the actual true implication, which the reporter knows of what the actual dynamic in the relationship is and stuff. And so again, I think people bitch and moan about things like late night comedy hosts being who we go to for news, but that's the thing. They're not beholden to certain journalistic standards, and so they can actually tell you the truth, not just kind of be a stenographer for what the officials are putting out there.
Right. Well, it's not. It's a lot of times it's not what you know; it's what you can prove, and you have to be able to put facts to the things that you're saying, even if you know them to be true. You have to be able to cite them somewhere. I don't know if it was in this episode or what, but when Gus is working with that one reporter who wrote the story about Bubbles, it was a great scene he had, and actually I think it was fantastic writing advice that he had for him, and he was like, sometimes the weakest part of your story, it's what's between the quote marks, and what you say to frame the scene or give people a sense of what's there is more valuable than you just saying, if somebody just says, oh, it's a bad scene, he said, that doesn't really paint the picture like you describing the scene that is bad. If you tell people kind of what they're supposed to be seeing and what they're supposed to be knowing about it, that will stick with people more than somebody just saying, it's bad, meh, he said. So, and that kind of stuck with me, and I thought was excellent, right? That show don't tell thing, and I thought that was really good advice. So
I think I think like just I think journalists are to some degree unfairly restrained by having to show just only what they can prove. Because like I can't prove that Donald Trump has a P tape, but I know it's true, right? I know deep down at my core that this is a thing that happened.
I don't know. After that performance in Helsinki, I think the certainty is nearing 100%.
Yeah.
President Putin, thank you. Two questions for you, sir. Can you tell me what President Trump may have indicated to you about officially recognizing Crimea as part of Russia? And then secondly, sir, does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
Значит, президента Трампа позиция по Крыму известна.
US President Donald Trump's position is well known on Crimea, and he's been sticking to it. He says Crimea has been taken illegally. We have a different opinion. We believe that we held a referendum in line with the rules and procedures of UN. So for us, this issue is closed. Now, as for compromising materials, well, I heard about it. There's been an allegation that we compiled a dossier on Trump when he came over to Moscow. My colleague, when Trump came over to Moscow, I was not aware of it. I respect President Trump as head of the United States, but when he came over as a businessman, I was not even aware that he's in Moscow. Take the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. More than 500 senior executives from the US came over to Russia. I don't even remember all of the names. Do you feel that we are compiling compromising materials in all of them? Well, it's absurd. I cannot really imagine anything more absurd than this. So please throw out this nonsense out of your heads.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago. And if anybody watched Peter Strzok testify over the last couple of days, and I was in Brussels watching it, it was a disgrace to the FBI. It was a disgrace to our country. And you would say that was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Like, I mean, what's going on with Trump these days? Okay, so what's going on? Michael Cohen says that he said, Michael Cohen, to place us in time and place, a couple of days ago, Michael Cohen's taped recording of Donald Trump in his office talking about, or in Trump Tower, where the fuck they had this meeting, talking about, what were they talking about? The payout to McDougal, right? The Playboy Playmate or whatever. And like Donald Trump says in the thing, like, okay, we'll pay with cash. And his lawyer's like, no, we're not going to do cash. Don't do that. We can't do that. Don't ever do that. And he's like, oh, okay, no cash. Yeah, all right. And then like Donald Trump is trying to say, his people are trying to say, no, he said don't use cash. And then Michael Cohen was just agreeing with him.
Let me know what's happening, okay? Oh. Maybe because of this, it would be better if you didn't go. Maybe because of this, for that one. I think what they should do is get rid of this because it's so false what they're saying. It's such bull. I think this goes away quickly. I think it's probably better do the Charleston thing just this time. Yeah, in 2 weeks it's fine. I think right now it's better. Okay, honey. You take care of yourself. Thanks, Pam. Yep, I'm proud of you. So long. Bye. What's up, Mike?
Great poll, by the way.
Yeah.
Seen it. Great poll.
Making progress.
Big time.
And you guys are good guys.
Oh, Pastor Scott?
No, Pastor Scott. What's happening?
Oh, no.
Can we use him anymore?
Oh, yeah. 100. No, you just meant Mark Burns. We told him just...
I don't mean that. Mark Burns, can we use him anymore?
No.
Richard Lefrak, I'm sorry, Richard Lefrak just called. He just had, we have a chance. He had an idea for you.
Okay. So we got served from the New York Times. I told you this regarding to unseal the divorce papers with Ivana. We're fighting it. Kaslowitz is going to
never be able to get that done.
Never. Kaslowitz doesn't. They'll ever be able. They don't have a.
Give me your card, please.
They don't have a legitimate purpose.
And you have a woman that doesn't want to unseal.
Correct.
So you've been handling.
Yes, and it's all.
It's been going on for a while.
For about 2-3 weeks now.
All you have to do is delay it for.
Even after that, it's not going to ever be opened. There's no purpose for it. Told you about Charleston. I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes, and it's all the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be.
Gets it by
Correct. So I'm all over that, and I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the kid.
No. I got no.
Because it's important, we want to hear again a key part of this conversation. Remember the setting, 2016, before the election, Donald Trump and Michael Cohen on a recording ultimately seized by the FBI, apparently about a payment made to a former Playboy model.
I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with.
So what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes, and it's all the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be.
Gets it by.
Correct. So I'm all over that, and I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the kid.
No. I got no.
And it's like, I can't hear very clearly exactly what was said on the tape, and I don't have any great trust for Michael Cohen, but I know Donald Trump's track record for lying and his people's track record for misrepresenting whenever he says the wrong thing. And so I know it's true that he said the other thing. I just know it's true. It should not be a 50-50, At some point, the lying has to catch up, and people in the news media have to say, okay, Donald Trump's people say this, but Donald Trump's people have a history of entirely misrepresenting facts going back, way back. It just provides some commentary on that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's exasperating as a consumer of the news that they have to even entertain the possibility that what Rudy Giuliani or whoever is saying about this could possibly even be plausible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've talked about this before, but that's been a big, not with me, because that's obvious what's happening. We're using the word lies as opposed to being misstated the truth, or didn't characterize things as the way they happen, because people are like, oh well, you can't prove intent, and it's at a certain point you kind of can. I mean, what else could it be? At a certain point, if they're not lying, it's I misremembered literally everything.
Mm-hmm. I misremembered everything in a way that could only possibly benefit me, when, if I remembered it correctly, it could only possibly hurt me. But you got to take me at my word here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very frustrating. But I don't know. I've seen a lot of stuff about Trump the past couple of days. I think, I don't know. It may be. We predicted his demise many times, but it's not, let's just say we can't predict his demise right now based off what's happened this week. But things are not going well for him, and what I've said since the very beginning of this thing, even in the darkest days, the earliest days of his presidency, when it seemed like he was getting away with it, my thought was always, I would rather be on the other side than on Donald Trump's side, because I think that he does not have a case in the long run, and I think in the end he's going to pay. And I would not want to be him, because he's facing jail. Mm-hmm. There was the interesting thing. Burrell apparently knew Prop Joe at school, and Prop Joe says Burrell was in the Glee Club. So that was another thing where,
yeah,
we had Bunk and Omar at the same school about a year apart, and it's just this interesting parallelism where you realize that these people basically came from the same place, and they just wound up in, through choices that they made early in their lives, they wound up in entirely opposite sides of the law, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, episode 5. React quotes. Cheese betrays Prop Joe and is there when he gets killed or something. Or I don't know if he was there when he got killed or not, but it was messed up. Yeah, I don't know. What did you think? Omar is an interesting looking person, and I think it's because his eyes are set so far apart.
Mm-hmm.
You notice that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when he kills Prop Joe, he just kind of has this almost orgasmic look on his face.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah.
Really weird. Bubs gets the news that he does not have AIDS. He finally gets himself checked with Waylon there, and they check, and Waylon reads the letter and says he doesn't have AIDS and stuff, even though he had shared needles with people he did, a lot, it sounds like. And that's, good news for Bubs. So.
Mm-hmm.
We had the scene where McNulty goes into the Baltimore Sun and he indulges the reporter who he knows has falsified this phone call to himself, because McNulty knows that there is no serial killer, and so he knows that this guy's running a game. But McNulty indulges him because they need each other at this point, and later, McNulty will go off on him for it. But I don't know. Yeah, it was a fascinating scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Omar attacks Monk's crib, which has been set up. They've got Michael and Chris and Snoop and a lot of muscle hanging out in this house, and they've made an obvious show of Monk going inside, and Omar's been scoping out with another guy who was the guy who had gone into prison on Butch's behalf to help protect Omar when he was going to get shanked. And I don't know, that was an interesting character. That was another character we really didn't know that much about. They were listening to kind of sound like some kind of 70s soul tunes or something, and he was clearly just a very, very old school kind of gangster guy, but also kind of a gentle soul.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, he gets shot in the face almost immediately when they assault the house there. And Omar realizes that it's a trap, and he ends up jumping out of the 6th story or something and breaking his ankle and hiding out in the broom closet in the same building while, everybody tries to figure out where the hell he ran off to after this attack. And that kind of sets off the end game for Omar, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
We had the new Westport development at Patapsco, bringing the Harbor Promenade, and Nikki Sabatka's in the audience there, and he yells at the mayor. He yells at them and says, "Fuck you," or something, and Arquetti says to his handler, "Who's that guy?" And the guy says, "Nobody at all." And that was, I don't know, that was a sad scene, right? I mean, we know who Mickey is. He's not nobody at all. He's somebody. He's the guy we followed throughout season 2. And yet, when people whose livelihood is going to be decimated by this new project because Parchetti thinks he needs to put his name on a project in the city, and they're damaging their, permanently handicapping the porch there.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's upset about it. And then, the political response is, well, that guy's not really anybody. And so that was a scene.
Mm-hmm.
McNulty begins his thing where he promises to make money flow for real police work from his bullshit homeless murder serial killer thing. And he kind of becomes like the de facto chief of the police department there, because everybody's coming to him to try to get funding for little things that they need. He's doling it out, and even when he tries to say, "No, this sounds like bullshit. You just want a vacation and you're trying to use your case to make this vacation," the guy says, "Look, we both know that if they find out what you're really doing here, you're going to be in lots of trouble. So you better give me this vacation right now. It's like, okay, I'll give you the vacation, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We also had Freeman talking to Sidner, and again, Sidner is the character that he's the quintessential character who was there all along, but I never really got to know because we never saw him outside of the police office. Basically, we didn't know his personal life, his inner life. And Freeman gives him a kind of speech about what they're doing when he tries to put him into this thing that he and Multi are doing. So he says, when they took us off the Marlow last time, when they said they couldn't have a final investigation, that decision is illegitimate. And so I'm responding in kind. I'm going to press a case against Marlow Stanfield without regard to the usual rules. That was interesting. And, I mean, I was going to get to it later, but the thing is, with regard to this thing, Marlow Stanfield is a horrible person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Chris and Snoop have done horrible things. A lot of people are dead. A lot of people will be dead in the future. We know this. And yet, the show puts us in the position of kind of rooting for some renegade cops who are totally disregarding, habeas corpus or whatever. Just just civil rights or the rights of the citizen or whatever. I mean, they're basically, pressing a case on somebody by pretending to be pressing a case on something else and using an illegal wiretap.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the post-Patriot Act world, I mean, this is something we should object to, right? But at the same time, in the context of this show, we know the stakes and we know where the bodies are buried and everything. And so we're kind of put in this position of kind of suing for the cops to totally subvert the law to go after this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that? That's kind of a big, broad question, but that's just something that we have to wrestle with to see something.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a dichotomy because in the end that they're trying to do the quote-unquote the right thing, but they're doing it the wrong way. So. But
yeah. I mean, we're basically asked to cheer for a police department gone rogue in a criminal prosecution of a minority individual, basically, which should rightly be thrown out of court if its full scope is uncovered, basically. But at the same time, knowing what we know about Marlow Stanfield, we're in a position of kind of rooting for these people because we know that they're good police who are being handicapped by the system. And I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe we can't wrestle with it too much, but it's just something to be cognizant of, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it kind of is what it is in the story, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Again, I think that this show has it's kind of an insult to call it a police procedural. But it sort of is a police procedural, but it's also so much more than what that, diminutive title would imply. But at the same time, I think that the show has a somewhat of a benevolent view of the police department. That, every police department that bends the rules for a prosecution like this is not comprised of the individuals that we've come to know and love in this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. It's something we have to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because that was with the Lester Freeman thing, that was what bothered me, that, he would go along with this and not do it the right way because he seemed so by the book,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that was obviously hard to buy, but at the same time, I felt like he knows that he's a good police officer, and he knows that McNulty's a solid investigator and stuff, and they just want to do what they're supposed to do and prevent crime and get bad people off the streets. And I think that Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a scene missing, I guess. And the scene missing is the scene where, and maybe there was a scene where Lester Freeman hits his limit, right? Because we can kind of buy it from McNulty because he's on the wagon, off the wagon, or whatever. He's drinking again. He's, frustrated by the incompetence of the department, and we can kind of see he's been screwed over. The first season they couldn't arrest Fowler or Barksdale. Later, Bell dies, Barksdale goes to jail. Barksdale gets out early. Barksdale goes back to jail. And now they've got this other guy taking things over. And obviously, it's never going to end, but he wants to have a successful prosecution of him as a drug kingpin that is, killing people. And he's thrown away his happiness by leaving his patrol job to come back to this unit that he thought he wanted. And now the unit has been defunded by the government over the school budget. And he sees that things are going back to when things are not going to get done correctly and stuff. And so I can see it for him. I didn't see the moment where Lester Freeman reaches that point, though.
Right. That's good. That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. After I guess different moving on, I guess after Pop Joe dies, they have another co-op meeting. Marlowe takes over the co-op. Basically, he offers Hungry Man's property to Slim Charles after he had killed Hungry Man. Slim Charles refuses, and so he gives it to Cheese, who is chopping at the bit to take it. Monk takes over the west side, Cheese takes over the east side, and then he just basically announces there's going to be no more co-op meets. This is the end of this. We're just, I'm going to manage things without actually being here to manage things, basically, and everybody else is kind of taken aback by this. It's, his seizing power, and, and there's not much to do, able or willing to do about it. So.
Right.
Omar starts calling out Marlowe, tries to get him to come out on the street to fight him one-on-one. And he starts hitting all the drug stashes and all the places that Marlowe controls and stuff, trying to get to come out. He burns the money, he throws away stashes. He's not doing it for the money, he's doing it just to get the Marlowe to come out. And yet everybody's too scared of Marlowe to go and tell him that Omar has basically called him a bitch in the street and wants him to come to him and stuff. And so he's ultimately frustrated in that respect. Let's see. Michael's mom gives up Michael for killing her boyfriend, to Bunk. Says he's running with Chris, Snoop, and all them gangsters. Who else is doing the killing around here? And so, Bunk gets onto the murder of her ex-boyfriend who was beaten to death last season for being a child molester, basically. I think then we come to episode 7 called Took, where at the beginning McNulty calls in as the killer, right?
Yes, the famous call.
Yeah, and then he goes to the newspaper reporter to get his statement about this phone call that was made to him, and he says, "I wouldn't worry. He's just using you. He needs you. It's working out pretty well for both of you, right?" Which is kind of a funny line because obviously McNulty is using him, and they're using each other anyway. The higher ups put Bunk on the homeless cases. And Bunk, kind of bucks at this because he knows the homeless cases are bullshit, and so he wants to, work his real murders, not the homeless stuff. And then we have kind of like parallelism again with the police response and the reporter response, the news media response to the homelessness crisis, which, I don't think there's any crisis in that it's not worse than it was before this homeless murder thing started being manufactured. But at the same time, we kind of see what happens when these institutions, as far as the police and the media, are brought to bear on a specific problem like homelessness. And they really, they focus on it, they throw their resources at it, they're looking at saving lives and, highlighting the plight of this thing. And, yeah, I don't know, that seemed kind of like a thing where David Simon is saying, look, if these institutions are really putting their bear on something that can make a difference, but I don't know. At the same time, homelessness can't be ended, basically, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought the homelessness issue was not really well done in this season. I think they tried to take a stab at it and tried to do it through the issue of this whole serial killer / newspaper thing, but I don't really think I don't know. I feel like they wanted to do more with it, but I don't think they really gave it their full effort. So, I mean, maybe they did that through Bubbles.
Yeah. Yeah, although Bubbles was not technically totally homeless, but yeah, in the middle. But I don't know. I'm not sure that they were really trying to talk about homelessness to the same degree that they were talking about the drug trade and stuff.
Sure.
I'm not sure. I feel like homelessness was more of a vehicle this season. I don't know. I think I agree. I don't think they did homelessness the same justice that they've done to other issues, but I think I disagree that it was intended to be more than it was.
Yeah. I guess one other storyline they wanted to do they didn't get to do in season 5 was immigration, but...
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah. I think Landsman said, "You turned on the fucking tap, Jimmy. They're finally paying for police work again." And then, and then Bunk said, "Shame on y'all. I mean it, too."
Yeah, I like that line.
Kind of the two reactions to what McNulty did. Yeah. And then, let's see. Then Gus gave the speech to Mike Fletcher. Go in depth. Don't worry. Go out there, find a story, take the time to percolate with it and stuff, and develop it. And then, if you feel like writing about it, write about it. But if you don't, that's okay. You're not, you're not beholden to the paper to give us this story. That seemed like a nice speech.
It was. I mean, that's the idealistic of like what investigative journalism should be. It's like if you follow things down, you may not come down a rabbit hole. You may not necessarily come up with anything, but that's the only way you're going to get anything worth reading in that case. So. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I should have quoted that speech more at length. I didn't write everything down, didn't make full notes on it, but it was a good speech, and I think one of the highlights of this season when it comes to the journalism aspect of the show. I loved it when Clay Davis was probably on the steps of the courthouse, and reporter said, "What are you reading in the Senate there, Senator?" And he said, "This here, Prometheus Bound, an ancient play, one of the oldest we have, about a simple man who was horrifically punished by the powers that be for the terrible crime of trying to bring light to the common people. In the words of Aeschylus, I have no idea how to read this ancient Greek name, no good deed goes unpunished. I cannot tell you how much consolation I find in these slim pages. One more question, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that I have my day in court, and I will see you inside." Clay Davis is like intentionally carrying this ridiculous book that he's,
never read.
Not have read because it's all about Clay Davis. It's like,
of course,
I am this person who was punished for the wrong reasons in society like 2,000 years ago or something. And I'm drawing that parallel for you.
Yeah.
You can write about it. Clay Davis, don't ever stop being Clay Davis.
Yeah, don't ever stop being you.
Yeah. Then we have, I think the next scene, Mike Fletcher, the reporter, meets Bubbles at the soup kitchen, and, he's obviously, Bubbles is knowledgeable about this whole scene and, gives him information which, eventually makes him interested in Bubbles to report Bubbles' story. Yeah. Omar continues his scorched earth policy with regard to Marlowe. He executes Savino. Savino is like, "You used to be muscle for Barksdale, didn't you?" He's like, "Yeah, that was then," or something. And he's like, and Omar looks like he's thinking about letting him go, but then he's like, "You know what?" And he shoots him in the face or something. And he's like, and then Omar approaches Michael's crew on his crutches from his still, broken ankle. Michael tries to look away so that Omar hopefully won't recognize him from the shootout at Monk's house. Omar is just on the warpath, basically. I thought they had the final conclusion of the Senator Clay Davis trial, where I said, he plays the race card from the bottom of the deck, to paraphrase the defense attorney from the O.J. Simpson trial. By the way, you got to watch the American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson. Great show, I thought.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Very interesting. And in this one, I think Perlman and Bond. I think Perlman plays Marcia Clark, and Bond plays Christopher Darden. Just two district attorneys basically totally out of their element, getting totally screwed by somebody else who has just played the emotional aspect of the case in a way that they didn't even see coming. And at the end of the thing, we have Kima's Goodnight Moon speech to her son, I guess, who's with her ex-girlfriend and stuff, but she's watched him at night. I don't know. I think they were going for something poignant. She's like, "Good night, hustlers. Good night, criminals. Good night, da 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 da." And I'm like,
thought that was kind of lame.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't think it quite hit the mark that they were going for. It seemed a little bit too, I don't know, on the nose or something. But that was the end of the episode. Again, I'm trying to kind of push us through here because I know we've taken a long time. I know this is our final episode and stuff, but at the same time, I do know I'm cognizant of our time and our audience's time. Episode 8. I forget the title.
Clarifications.
Okay. Terry Horing, I don't know who that was, said, "A lie ain't a side of a story, it's just a lie." I think that's something we would all do well keep in mind here in the days of Trump. It's something we need to remind ourselves of, because that was the kind of the title card that plays after the
epigraph,
the gutter song, basically. Yeah, and it was, a lie ain't a side of a story, it's just a lie.
That was the homeless veteran that says this in rebuttal of Scott Templeton.
Yeah. It's very important, when Donald Trump or when Sarah Huckabee Sanders or whoever they put out there, tries to give an alternate version, they give us the alternate facts. We have to remember that sometimes a lie is just a lie. It's not a defensible position. We catch up with Poot, who has been to jail. He's been out of jail. He's been back on the corner, and he's seen the drama with Marlowe, and he's now got a job. He's got a job that looks like a Foot Locker or something like that. And Dookie has come in looking for a job, and Poot can't give him the job. He says he's not old enough. So again, Dookie is getting squished in between, not being able to stay in school, not having a family to support him, and yet not being old enough to take the responsibility to support himself in society, basically. So, and we see the tragic consequences of that. And Poot says he just got tired. He got tired of kind of being on the streets and being on the corner, and the death, the jail, the all that stuff. So that was kind of an interesting ending point for Poot. Omar continues his scorched-earth policy. He rats out a crew to the police. And when they're gone, I think he goes and dumps their stash or something when they get run off the thing. And then he goes into a Korean-owned convenience store, and he gets shot in the back of the head by a kid who had been torturing a cat a few scenes earlier when he walked up to do the thing. And that was really terrible. Everybody loved Omar, right? It's just he's a force of nature. He's a great character, and I don't know. It's painful to watch him go out like that. I don't know how he should have gone out, and maybe I think a strong argument can be made that making him go out like a huge hero in a hail of gunfire would be a little bit too obvious.
Mm-hmm. Well, they talked about that in the book, and David Simon said he fought against that to have it just be kind of a mundane thing with that kid. That was more the way he wanted him to go out, as opposed to like the big Old West, gun battle or whatever. So.
Yeah, I think it was probably the right choice. I think that it would have been very obvious to have him, just go out as a hero in a gun battle or something. But he kind of gets a posthumous heroic action when Bunk finds the list of all of the street locations and the names of the lieutenants of Marlowe and where they are, because Omar was going around hitting those places, and then Bunk says, okay, well, I'm going to give this to Lester basically and tell him, okay, this is where these people are, this is what they're doing. And that kind of ultimately helps Lester solve the code, I think.
Yeah. Apparently when they shot that scene with Omar getting shot, that kid, that look on his face is apparently very realistic, because apparently they didn't tell him that the blood was going to come out of the back of his head like that, and he ran into his mother's arms and started crying and stuff after that. So apparently that reaction right after he shot him was a pretty realistic thing, and I guess Michael K. Williams, the guy that played Omar, had to show him look, no, you didn't actually shoot me, it's just fake, it's so I guess I feel a little bit bad about that, but at least it was a genuine reaction in the moment. So
yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, David Simon's a fan of cinema verite.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a correct reference?
That pretty much, yeah.
He wants to get the method, even if the method is gotten in the wrong way.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when McNulty and Kima go to the FBI to get their profile of the killer, right, based on what they've heard on the phone. And they basically describe McNulty. They say, sexual to the point but inhibited, nocturnal on some, diurnal on the others, white male, late 20s to 30s, likely not a college graduate, but feels nonetheless superior to those with advanced education, likely employed in a bureaucratic entity, possibly civil service or quasi-public service, from which he feels alienated. He has a problem with authority and a deep-seated resentment of those who he feels have impeded his progress professionally. The minimized sexual activity suggests that this is not a primary motive for the killings. The suspect has trouble with lasting relationships and is possibly a high-functioning alcoholic. With alcohol being used as a trigger in the commission of these crimes. That was funny.
Yeah.
So he says, sometimes we go to the FBI and they give us some stuff. They tell us some stuff we already know and stuff. And they're not really helpful, but at this point he's kind of like, whoa, they've kind of got me to a T here. He goes home late one night drunk. He's been cheating on Beatty. He's been being a bad boyfriend, basically. And he finds a note that says, Jimmy, one possible future. Be back tomorrow or the next day or not. Think about it. B. And that was kind of a powerful. I think Beatty does a lot with a little bit of screen time, basically.
Yeah, totally.
And at this point, she's basically letting him know that if he keeps behaving the way he is, she and her family are not going to, be with him there in the future.
Yeah, I felt bad for her. I felt bad for Beatty.
Yeah. Yeah, she was getting a raw deal. I think in the next scene, one of the scenes later, Jimmy has done a pretty good job of selling his scheme to the people who need to know. But the one person he doesn't sell it to is Kima. He tells her what he's doing, and then he basically runs out of the interrogation room where they're having this private conversation, and she is not fully sold on it yet. But he just lets her sit with it, and that ultimately really comes back to bite him because she kind of rats him out. Which was interesting because, there have been scenes in the past seasons where we talked about, Kima was kind of becoming the female Jimmy McNulty, basically. And at this point, she basically kind of goes way back on that and says, no, I'm not going to be this guy. This guy he's way wrong, and I can't stand for it, basically. And she becomes more like Daniels, I think, in that moment.
Mm-hmm. I don't mean to rush you, but I do have to get off at some point here, so.
That's what she said.
Never ends. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. Let me see. 1, 2. Okay. All right. I've got 3 more pages.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Yep, sure.
Okay. Let's see. There's a showdown between Templeton and Gus. Beatty gives a speech. She says, basically, only family comes to your funeral. All the people you drink with and work with, they're going to remember you as that funny guy, but they're not going to, be there when you're gone. Your family's for that and stuff. And that was a powerful speech, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And McNulty says, you start telling the story, and you think you're the hero, and then when you get to the end, and you realize, maybe I try to explain what I'm doing to my girlfriend here, and she thinks I'm wrong and stuff. And I think we've all had moments like that where we were righteous on something, but then we ended up not being.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of this episode, Omar's switched toe tags with another guy, a white guy, and the guy at the morgue switches the toe tags back. And that was kind of the end of the episode. And I was like, what was the significance of that? As our final goodbye to Omar Little, what was the significance of that?
I think maybe it was just that outside of the streets or his world, he's just a faceless, nameless, it doesn't really matter who he is. But, when he's walking through the hood, he's, Omar's stepping, Omar's coming, he's a legend in the street. But if you get right down to it, if you get to the nitty gritty of it, when he's finally toe tagged, they don't even get the name right because it's like, who cares? Just another dead guy. So.
Yeah, I guess that's as good as an explanation as I could expect, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote I forget, and obviously there's a lot of chess references in this show, but it's like the pawn and the king go back at the same box at the end of the game. I'm mangling that quote, but that's the gist of it. So.
Yeah. Well, we come to episode 9 here, late editions. The mayor is now pushing hard to get a 10% drop in crime, which is the exact thing that he promised Daniels that he was not going to do, was, focus on the numbers. And yet, almost in the same moment, Freeman delivers by coming to Daniels and right after Daniels get out of this meeting where he's like, "You got to reduce crime." And then Daniels, meets Freeman, and Freeman says, "Look, I've got this case, and we're ready to go on it. We're ready to arrest everybody. I just need you to sign some things." And he's like, "Oh, okay." The mayor gives a tough on crime speech after they bust they bust most of Marlowe's crew picking up the major stash, the resupply, and he gives a tough on crime speech, and this reporter who's watching it goes, "Oh, you are so butch." that was kind of a funny moment. And at the point where Marlowe is in jail with his gang, and they're all trying to figure out what happened, and I think Monk or somebody says to him, like, "No, yeah, Omar's dead, but Omar was out there putting your name in the street." And Marlowe gets furious, and he says, "Let him know. Marlowe said to any motherfucker, Omar, Barksdale, whoever, my name is my name."
Mm-hmm. One of the quotes of the show, for sure.
That was yeah, my name is my name.
I even knew that one before I even watched the show.
Yeah, it's a great line, because like if you don't watch the show, you don't really know what it means. But like, yeah, for people like Barksdale, for people like Omar, for people like Marlowe, their name really was the only thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was a kind of a poignant moment.
Well, in the book I read, they talked to the actor that played Chris Partlow, and he kind of points out that was the only time that Marlowe ever lost his cool. And, it was like kind of a strategy on his part by keeping the information from him that, Omar had been putting it in the streets, that he couldn't step to him because he knew he was going to react like that. And Marlowe was so like businesslike all the time. And, he's trying to act as like a consigliere type, Silvio Dante type figure. ear to him in that moment because he knows that the top guy, Marlowe, is going to fly off the handle when he hears that. But it's like, Omar's dead. You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't matter anymore. But Marlowe still, this is important to him. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely a character moment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought in the newsroom somebody said there like one of the higher ups who supports Scott Templeton in his reign of bullshit there says, and Scott, we need to start looking for the points where the response to the problem can be criticized. So covering the reaction to our stories is as important as the stories themselves. I thought that was an interesting thing because sometimes we definitely see that, like in the media, right? Like, I mean,
mm-hmm.
there will be a response to something that won't be pitch perfect or something because it couldn't be. How could it be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, the enemy of the great is the good or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. It's just something we notice sometimes. I think, like Hillary Clinton will make a tiny mistake and it'll be put up next to one of Donald Trump's major fuck-ups that would capsize any other campaign. And it's like, well, but Hillary Clinton did this little mistake or something. And it's kind of like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look for the points where the other side can be criticized too, because that's our job too, or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. It's kind of a thing. Like, I don't know if you feel like there's any room to criticize the news media on that, but sometimes, like, I feel like, yes, the job is to, speak truth to power, but sometimes I feel like the criticism is a little bit nitpicky at
mm-hmm.
times, right? Like,
sure.
Totally true. Fake news.
Well, it's also kind of an interesting juxtaposition as to what they concentrate on. If you want to go back to Omar, he's just like a news item in the, crime section, and they just kind of,
And what did you think when Gus bumped the story of Omar's death for the story of a fire in an apartment somewhere?
That I can totally see that happening. And in a city big enough as Baltimore, you're never going to know that was such a monumental event in that neighborhood or whatever, unless you actually did what
mm-hmm.
that one guy did with Bubbles and get right down in it. But I mean, you just don't have the time to do that with every single story. And on its face, that does seem like a bigger story that day. You know what I mean? But if you really dug into it, you would know that there was a bigger thing happening with Omar. But it's just like, how many people live in Baltimore?
Yeah, it was a really sad moment for me because I like Gus and we all love Omar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to scream at Gus, no, motherfucker, Omar dying is like the biggest thing since Stringer Bell got killed. I mean, dude, this is monumental.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, just bump it and do the story about the fire, and we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, but I sympathize with him. I could totally see him making the same decision if you're just trying to get the paper put to bed that day, and it's like what on its surface looks like the bigger story that has more impact.
I thought it was interesting about this point that Freeman and McNulty both thought that the homeless murderer surveillance would die down naturally, but we as the audience know that it can't, because the politicians can't take the chance that there's still a killer out there unless they know that there was no killer. And the Baltimore Sun needs to bang the story continually through December at least to continue to get their Pulitzer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we see that the institutions, the politicians are not going to let this thing go. The newspapers can't let this thing go either for their own reasons. And so McNulty and Freeman, hoping that things are just going to die down if there's no more murders, is kind of like a fool's game there or something. So,
yeah.
I thought it was fascinating to learn that Chardine was still with Lester. So Lester Freeman and Chardine from season 1 are still together.
Mm-hmm.
It was, not something we necessarily knew.
Yep.
I think you had mentioned before that you had questions about that. Like, are they going to stay together? And yeah, we'll talk about it later. They do. So that was interesting. We saw Naaman, Lee-Bay's son, make good on the debate team.
Yep.
Which was I don't know, inspirational.
Mm-hmm.
It was good to see him, doing okay. We saw.
I mean, you want to see one of the kids not doing horribly. So
at the same time, he's not the one I want to see doing good. He was a fucking asshole to his friends back in the day when he was on the corner and stuff. Michael had problems. Dookie had problems. Randy was doing okay, but later, he's got problems. but Naaman was kind of a fucking bully asshole, and I was not thrilled to see him. I mean, it's good that one of them, made it to a better life and looks like they're going on to better things, and maybe that's the best we can hope for, is that one of them would, but...
Sure, but I mean, as Snoop says in the epigraph at the beginning of the episode, deserves got nothing to do with it, It doesn't mean he deserved to have that happen, it just so happened that he was in that thing with Bunny, and there you go. So... Yeah, it was a nice way to put a bow on that story, I guess, because they had to do it. But I don't know, the kids. I don't know. Yeah, the the season 4 kids. I don't know. Yeah, that was a story. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyways, okay, continuing on. Freeman sells Clay Davis's case back to him by getting info on Levy and the source within the grand jury who was informing Prop Joe. So that was interesting. Let's see. We had Bubbles say, "My name is Reginald." Mm-hmm. And Bubs gives a speech. He gives a full-hearted speech, basically. Again, we have the thing about the name. Omar's name. Marlo's name, and then Bubs' name, which is actually Reginald. That's, I don't know, something about names in this season. Yeah, that's a good point.
I thought I saw a woman in the Narcotics Anonymous meeting who was Omar's hit lady. He had the 2 women he was running with, and I thought that this woman might be Omar's hit lady. I might be misreading her, though.
Didn't notice that, yeah.
That's neither here nor there. I don't know. It might require reviewing or something, but... We had the amazing scene where Snoop picks up Michael to the strains of T-Pain's "I'm Sprung."
I noticed that too.
Michael's already scoped them out, and he knows that they're going to kill him, basically.
Yep.
And he gets the drop on her because she told him, "Don't bring the gun. We got a gun for you for this job tonight." He's like, that kind of told him, like, "Wait a minute, they've never said that before. I'm bringing a gun." And then, like, he says, "Pull into this, this alley. I need to take a piss." He's like, "Damn, we need piss when you get there." And he's like, No, I really gotta go." And she's like, "Okay." So then he pulls over and he pulls the gun on her, and she realizes she's over it. And she says, he's like, why are you gonna do this?" He's like, you're always bucket and everything, and you just do what you're supposed to do. And he's like, "Oh, cool. Well, now we're able to tell her something." She's like, "How my hair look like?" And he's like, "You look good, girl." And then
yeah, that was a good scene, yeah.
That was like, whoa. That was, damn. Yeah, I don't know. That was crazy. I mean, that was such a weird thing, because at the beginning of the thing, when we were first introduced to her, I wasn't even sure it was a man or a woman. And then at the end, she's like, "How's my hair look?" And he's like, "You look good, girl." It's like, it's a total reaffirmation that this is a girl, right? It's a woman, basically. But she's also this cold-blooded hit woman killer who's slaughtered like dozens of people. And yet at the end, we're brought back to this place where she's a human being, and she wants to be seen a certain way right before she gets shot in the face. It's fucked up.
Yeah, the real story behind her, she actually has the same name in the show as she does in real life, but she apparently was just days out of prison for manslaughter, and she saw Michael K. Williams, the guy that plays Omar, was in a club, and as she put it, he was ice grilling her, and he saw her in the club, and he just basically brought her to the set straight out of prison, and she just started being on the show because he was like, "Look, she's for real, and you should put her on, and she's got something." So she was like apparently one of the people that like was super duper like authentic. So.
What do you mean ice grilling her at the club?
I just mean like scoping her out, just kind of like seeing her from across the club and noticing that she had a special something about her, I guess. So.
Yeah, didn't know that detail. I knew he killed somebody, basically, and, she was a criminal, basically.
Well, apparently the guy that played Prop Joe in real life, he ran like a youth program for acting and stuff, and he brought a lot of like the kids that played, were bit players, and some of the kids from season 4. Apparently, he made the introduction from them. So apparently, like a lot of the Baltimore people came through him because I guess he was like really in Baltimore and in the streets and working with like kids and theater and stuff. So
yeah, that's actually weird. They like they have their own kind of the nice one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Towards the end of this episode, we have more of a heartbreaking downfall of Duquan. He says to Lincoln killing Snoop. Quan says, "Well, you gotta see this show. There's a serial killer, but he don't be killing the serial killers." And I think on the face of it, that was a comment on Michael, who just killed Snoop. And Snoop is a serial killer.
Yep.
And Michael is rapidly becoming a serial killer. But on the more kind of like macro level, I thought this line was actually from season 1. I thought one of the guys said it down at the low rises with Barksdale's nephew.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out no, it was like near the end of season 5, and it was from Duquan to Michael. But I thought that this was a perfect put down of every other TV show out there, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is saying like, oh yeah, you've got the Dexter show where you've got the serial killer who's sort of a serial killer, but he's killing other serial killers, and he's in the police department, and that's like this whole gimmick and stuff. And it's like that's the status of other TV. And look at what we're doing right here on The Wire. We're bringing the real and stuff. And like these other shows were like, oh, he's a serial killer, but he kills other serial. I mean, it's like it's gimmicky, it's cheap, it's tawdry, it's just very And so I thought that was a great line, and I thought it was also a great shot across the bow of other premium TV at the time.
Definitely.
Great. Augie, I thought at the end to see Augie is in evidence control. This is the guy who's an alcoholic in season 1 trying to get him to throw off the special.
Mm-hmm.
I always have a stairs or everything. So, I'm glad to see that in the job. He's like, hey, I'd rather be in evidence control than working or something.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was the end of the episode. And that brings us to season 5, episode 10, named only 30. I don't know why it was called 30.
That's actually a journalism term that means the end of a story.
Oh, okay, good to know.
They put that on the end of press releases mostly, but yeah, that's journalism code.
Okay. Well, it's been revealed. Like at the beginning of the show, Daniels is revealing exactly what McNulty and Freeman had been doing to the mayor, and the politicians want the police to sit on it. Basically, they say like, don't do anything on this yet. Don't fire these people because if it comes, we are basically making my political run for governor of Maryland on the back of this homelessness thing. And if you reveal that there never was any homelessness serial killing murder, then I'm screwed in the general election here. So that was fascinating. And Daniels is mad as hell, and he calls out McNulty, Freeman, and Sidner by name when he's walking out the door, saying, like, we're going to fucking fire these people, basically. We have the heartbreaking scene of Duquan and Mr. Presbo at the end, where Duquan comes back asking for money, and Presbo, handles another student who's bullying another student like a pro, and we see that he is kind of come full circle, and he is a respected member of the teaching faculty there who, when he tells people to do something, they listen to it, and we realize, like, wow, he's come full circle, and Duquan is asking for money. It's fucking heartbreaking, I think. We have a one-party consent call, which is an interesting thing to talk about when we talk about Donald Trump with his lawyer.
Yeah.
In New York, apparently, one-party consent call is legal. Apparently, also in Baltimore, Maryland. It's
also in Indiana. Also in Indiana, too.
Good to know. Good to know.
So I could record my podcast without even telling people if I wanted to.
There you go. Yeah. So that was anyways. This one-party consent call implicates Gary Levy because Freeman has found the man who's in massive gambling debt who has been sharing grand jury indictments and stuff with the Prop Joe drug crew through the lawyer Levy. And so that was, interesting, but it was interesting to talk about one-party consent. Marlowe's in jail. He comes back in from his meeting with Levy, where Levy basically tells him exactly what's happening. He says, he says, "Cheese, you getting out?" And he says to Monk, "You ain't." he just kind of lays it out there. You're going to jail for a long time. You're getting out. Okay. And of course, this is actually a death sentence for Cheese. Cheese probably would have been better off being in jail, but he gets out. I think Marlowe believes that Michael has been ratting on him after he killed Snoop, so he orders them to go out and kill Michael. McNulty's wondering why the government hasn't shut them down and stuff and fired them and thrown them in jail, and he says something like, "I don't know. The lie's so big, people can live with it, I guess." And that's, in the age of Donald Trump, the idea of the big lie is something we can keep in mind. I liked it when they had another copycat murder come up, and Rawls and Daniels bring McNulty into the interrogation room, and Rawls just says, "You're not killing them yourself, McNulty. At least assure me of that." And at that point, you don't really know who killed the other guy. You're like, could it have been McNulty? Could it have been the reporter? I mean, who killed this guy, right? And it's like you're kind of right there with Rawls for the first time in the whole show. You're just like, yeah, McNulty is a loony bastard. He might have actually done this shit.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Anyways, there was a very good montage in the scene that had no music. They just had shots of the city, of the bay, of the downtown, of the hood. I mean, just like a great montage, I thought. And we get to the point where the politicians come back to Daniels, and they want him to check the stats at least for 2 months or something before the election, and then he says, "No, if I do it now before the election, then after the election, the Reese will be asking me for the first couple months of her administration to do it." And at that point, it's going to become he realizes he can't juke the stats even once, because if he does it once, then it's gonna snowball, and he's never going to stop doing it. And they're like, "Well, you're covering up for us on this homeless murders thing, so why can't you do this?" He's like, "No, the stats are going to be right. That's what I told you at the beginning, and I'm not compromising on that."
Yeah.
That was an interesting character moment, and I'm gonna be real. That's the point I got to basically in the show, where my notes ends.
Right. Well, I think we kind of talked about what else happens. We see a story come out about Bubbles, and it looks pretty good, and we see Bubbles come back up from the basement there. We see Chris Partlow with Weebay in prison in the final thing. Templeton wins the Pulitzer Prize. Arg. Let's see. We have Carcetti becomes governor, much like O'Malley. So yeah, that's pretty much
Hillary Clinton in the primary.
Yeah, exactly. We don't see the ending part of that. I did think it was one more thing I could say about this last episode would be of course, there's always the big song that they use at the end for the big montage. They went back to the first season theme song with the Blind Boys of Alabama version of the Way Down in a Hole. I see why they did it. I understand. I thought it was kind of lazy. They could have done something else. It seemed like they were just folding back in on themselves. I understand it's the end of the series and they know that. But any end of season, I feel like could have been the end of the series if they hadn't played their cards right. And I feel like that it was, I don't know, felt a little bit lazy to me, and I felt they could have done a more impactful job if they picked a different song. So.
Okay. Yeah.
But was there anything else we didn't? I mean, we talked about a lot, but.
I mean, I seem to remember there was a scene where where Michael is going to rob some drug dealers or something.
Oh, yeah.
Omar.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get to that scene, so I don't remember exactly what happened or what brought that about, but I remember that scene also.
Yes, that was a good point. Yeah, because that was also in the montage where right after that we see, Dookie shooting up, and we kind of realize he's going to be the new Bubbles at that point. So, yeah, that was also in that part of the episode. So,
yeah, I think that was a good thing about the last two seasons. That they bring you full circle to see. Because, we don't, a lesser show, I feel like, would do a spin-off where they say, okay, this is the young Bubbles, and this is the young, Omar. But this show doesn't even have to do that, because through these children, we've basically seen these other people's past, and we've seen what their future is going to be. And we see, death and redemption for various people and stuff. And so the show, in a very ingenious way, has come full circle by the time you came to the story. Right? And so I thought that was just masterful writing and direction there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did it. We made it through the entire wire.
Yeah. What if you could look back now, because it was kind of a hard sell to get you to watch this show. I've been trying to get you to watch this show for a couple of years.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell your younger self now?
Just stick with it. And it's probably a shame I didn't stick with it the first or the second time, because I think I had gotten to right before Kima gets shot, and I think you're right in identifying that as the scene or episode when I was finally hooked. Because I feel like the first 2/3 of the first season are like a bowstring on a bow being pulled back, and that's the big release, and all that tension comes shooting out, and then you kind of see where it was going. And apparently, I'm reading this book, apparently that was a problem too, because they had a hard time getting people to watch it initially, and that it was kind of that was where the hook was for people that pulled them all in. So it was kind of slow and plotting, but you do kind of see what they were doing. They're building the world, they're building the tension, and it all kind of gets released after that, and then you're kind of all in after that. And that was long term probably a better way to get people hooked. It's just like that kind of came about before DVDs, binge watching, Netflix, I watching on streaming, that kind of thing was a thing. So it was kind of, they were a little bit ahead of their time in that way. So
yeah, and I think that's why this show gets a lot of love now retroactively. When it, if a sixth season of The Wire was announced tomorrow, people would go ape shit, right? I mean, it's almost amazing that they haven't done it, but at the same time, it's been a long time ago now. It's been 10 years since the show ended. And yet, here we are talking about it, and here you are about to maybe have an interview with a guy who wrote a book about the show.
Yeah.
That's good for him, it's good for us, maybe.
Right, and the book was immediately a New York Times bestseller, too, right as soon as it was released. And this show couldn't get, it was hard, it was on the verge of getting canceled the whole time. There was on the very last page of this book, there's a quote from the guy that plays Poot. He says, if David Simon said The Wire is coming back for season 6, do you know what would happen to the world? Worldwide, it would be crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what would happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because I think that this show has achieved critical mass.
Oh, yeah.
Pun intended. After its initial run, basically. I was not really aware of the show too much when it was on, but, my God, I was in there of it. After 2010, 2011, when I first watched the thing, at that point I was transfixed. And so, and you said, I think you said right after you were very upset or emotional after you finished the final episode. You said, we can't say this is the best show ever when this is how it ends. How do you think it stands up to Breaking Bad and The Sopranos after, having a kind of a week to kind of stew?
I'm going to stand by my statement that the serial killer storyline was a huge misstep on the show's part, and it had some excesses in the final season. I think it had still, even in season 5, that I would probably say is the lowest of the seasons in my estimation. I still think it had some great storylines we mentioned, with Clay Davis and the kids and some other things that we wrapped up, and even the journalism thing I didn't have a huge problem with, other than I didn't like how that ended just for personal reasons. But but I still think there are scenes and characters and storylines that are the best of anything ever, just because of the how expansive the scale was of the show. Sopranos is probably still my favorite show of all time, just because it's fun to watch in a way that The Wire maybe isn't. There's a little bit of eating your vegetables type thing with The Wire, I feel like, in certain ways. But I'd say there's a strong case to be made of it being the most impactful, the most meaningful, the most the best, most well done, but with the greatest scope of any TV show ever. And it definitely changed the course of history, even retroactively after it was out for a few years. So yeah, I think that you could definitely make an argument for that. Is it my favorite show? Yeah, I don't think so. I think I still got to give it to The Sopranos, just for personal. I still think it's probably my favorite show. So
yeah, I think we have to remember that The Sopranos is missteps. There were missteps there too.
Oh, of course.
I would actually like. I think I think the question we need to wrap this podcast up with is, where do we go from here? Now, we have talked about The Corner, in which I'm going to try to seek out and see if I've got a copy of it around my house somewhere or something. And we've talked about Treme, which I'm sorry to say is a show that I started watching. I watched the first season. I started the second season. I lost track of it. There were too many other shows out at the time, and it was kind of a slow burn. And I didn't feel like quite what I felt with The Wire and stuff. So we could definitely do that. I've recommended The Shield because I will say, back in like 2010, 2011, when I first watched The Wire, when I finished it, I was like, wow, that was a police procedural par excellence, and I need to see something else like that pronto. And I think I picked up The Shield, which The Shield is a different beast, but it's also a show that gets a lot of respect, rightly so in some ways, and it's also a good show, I think. But at the same time, I almost want to recommend that you go back and watch The Sopranos from season 1 right now, and just kind of you kind of have to see things close together to kind of actually compare them, right? Because we have, The Sopranos. You and I have watched parts of it back in college, and we both have subsequently watched the whole thing.
Well, my proposal more is to maybe do The Corner, just because it's only 6 episodes. It's kind of a contained story. I feel like we could probably tackle that one a little bit easier and maybe see where we want to go over there. Because from what I understand, The Corner is kind of a precursor in a lot of ways to The Wire. So I think maybe that might be the way to go. But yeah, I think that would be my suggestion, and then we can maybe see where we want to go from there. I do want to maybe one day when I have more time. Maybe watch Homicide: Life on the Street, but that's another one, that's more a Law and Order police procedural story. Maybe I wouldn't get as much out of that, but that also is a precursor to The Wire in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I think I tried to watch that one time, and I just couldn't get into it. It's just kind of like Irish cops with their, I think the main TV send up to this kind of trashy, police procedural show. Yeah. Like, you got an alcoholic Irish cop who's like, fuck you, baby Jesus, we'll go right now. Or something. He's like screaming at the world, basically, or something. And I just couldn't get into the Homicide: Life on the Street.
Yeah, no, I don't even think we should necessarily do that one. But yeah, and I feel the same way about Treme. I've seen a little bit of it, didn't really hook me, but I felt the same way about The Wire for a long time, but I know it's not as well regarded as The Wire.
I would be willing to do Treme, just because I think that
it's only 3 seasons too. I think we could probably get through that. So.
Yeah, he's earned something from us after this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
He's earned some a leap of faith on something else that he's going to do. Again, I recommend rewatching The Sopranos. The Sopranos is a brilliant show. It's a beautiful show. It's got a lot of comedy mixed in with its drama. It's got extreme violence, etc. But one thing I remember about The Wire, about The Sopranos, is that David Simon can't write black people for shit, right?
You mean David Chase?
David Chase. Other David. I'm sorry. That's a hell of a postscript to put on The Wire. David Simon can't write black people.
Yeah, after we've talked about him for 10 hours, writing about it.
He wouldn't have gotten this. He wouldn't have gone past the pilot if he couldn't do that. But
I will agree with that. But that's why it's a genre show. It's like this like Italian mobster, Goomba, like totally, you know what I mean? It's like totally. But he's got that ear for that like kind of mafioso speak. But yeah, whenever there's a black character, it's like, yo, this is tight, yo. Like it's very kind of clunky and stereotypical and not very. But I think David Simon really. So I think since he was a crime reporter and he did spend time on the ground level with a lot of people who did talk like that. Really, he probably has more of an ear for it. So,
yeah, but I feel like I'm just saying I feel like there were some pretty glaring deficiencies sometimes within The Sopranos. The Sopranos is a brilliant show. I love it. As far as The Wire is absolutely my number one. And since seeing The Wire, I've kind of gone back and forth, but I finally come down on, The Wire. And I'm 35 years old, 36 in Korea. And, at this point in my life, I got to start eating my vegetables, right?
Right. Well, and the only reason I hold things like the serial killer storyline against The Wire is because everything else felt so real. And that was the only thing that stuck out to me as like just clunky and unrealistic. And why is this here? So, I mean, when The Sopranos went off the Wire trail, I was maybe a little more forgiving because it felt a little more cartoony to begin with. But hey, thanks for going through it with me, and let me know if you can find the corner or not.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope our audiences in Burgess having this and watched along if they haven't seen before, that they've at least been inspired for practicing work.
If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. I have a Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. And if you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Until next time.